I hope he wasn't alarmed by how swiftly everything happened to him. One of the most beloved performers of the 1970s, John Denver was renowned for his poignant lyrics, soft voice, and songs that captured the beauty of the natural world and the human condition. With hits like Take Me Home, Country Roads, Annie's Song, and Rocky Mountain High, he captured the hearts of millions. But behind the wholesome image was a man who struggled with personal turmoil, especially in his relationships. His marriage to Annie Martel inspired one of his most famous songs, yet their love story ended in heartache. And before his tragic passing in 1997, Denver reflected on his life, career, and the woman he had loved. A love story that inspired a classic. They couldn't figure out what it was. They gave her some pain pills and decided that they would set up an appointment to see a doctor the next morning, which we did. Went to see the doctor, went through this whole thing, and Annie was in there. It seemed like years, and pretty soon she came out and wouldn't tell me anything, just pay the link bill, we'll go. And I was getting nervous, and we got outside. I said, well, now what's the matter? She says, well, I was in there and the doctor was examining me. There was a nurse standing there, and he says, what are you doing in Phoenix, Annie? She says, well, we just got married. I've been married a couple of days and we're having our honeymoon here. Oh, is that right? How long did you say you've been married? Just 2 days. Well, Annie, I'll be honest with you, I think this lovemaking has gotten a bit much for you. I think your husband's cracked your rib. The new camp and winner John Denver first met Annie Martel in the middle of the 1960s when he was still a budding musician playing with the Mitchell Trio. At the time, Annie was a student at Gustavus Adolphus College in Minnesota, and Denver later acknowledged that he was immediately drawn to her. Annie remembered how he told her that he had fallen in love with her at first sight, captivated by her warmth and charm. However, because Denver was always traveling, their early relationship was based on letters and brief moments together, but despite the distance, they always managed to stay in touch. A year later, fate brought them back together when Denver returned to Minnesota for another performance, but this time, they didn't let each other go. The newlyweds moved to Minnesota on June 9, 1967, but Denver's music career was taking off quickly. As his schedule became more demanding, his songwriting flourished and his deep love for Annie became a recurring theme in his music. One of the most heartfelt expressions of that love was Annie's Song, written in 1974. Denver later revealed that the song came to him in an instant while he was riding a ski lift in Aspen, Colorado. Inspired by a moment of pure joy and clarity, he rushed home and wrote the song in just 10 minutes. It became an instant classic, topping the charts and establishing his status as one of the greatest songwriters of his generation. When Annie first heard it, she was moved to tears by the sincerity of the lyrics, which so perfectly captured their love. However, behind the scenes, the pressures of fame were starting to take their toll. Due to Denver's hectic schedule, which required him to spend a lot of time away from home, Annie felt alone and unsure of their future. She later acknowledged in interviews that she experienced feelings of insecurity, particularly as Denver's fame increased and the man she had married was no longer just John the folk singer but rather John Denver, the global superstar, with concerts, interviews, and television appearances taking up most of his time. Their once intimate bond started to erode what had begun as a romantic relationship. Whirlwind was now being tested by the realities of a high-profile marriage, a marriage in Christ, and one didn't mean to scare her. It didn't even occur to me that she would ever think that I would hurt her. Yeah, here I am standing with a chainsaw, and what else is she going to think, right? But I just didn't. I can't conceive anybody would think that I would hurt them. I'm not that kind of person, and even within that, as I said in the book, at one point when she started wagging her finger at me, I had laid the chainsaw down over here and we were talking. I asked her why she cut these trees down out here. They were as much a part of this home as the walls and the floor and the roof, and how could she do that without talking to me about it? And she started wagging her finger at me, and I grabbed her and I had her up on a counter, and I don't know if I still had my hands on her shoulders or around her throat, but just as quick as it happened I stopped. Annie Denver's musician had achieved new heights, but his time at home was becoming more and more scarce. By the late 1970s, fractures had started to appear in their marriage. I don't mean to hurt you, I wouldn't do that. The couple had moved to Aspen, Colorado, where Denver found inspiration for many of his songs, but despite the idyllic surroundings, their relationship was anything but peaceful during their time apart. The demands of stardom and Denver's developing inner conflicts all contributed to their marital struggles. Annie, who had previously been his anchor, felt like an afterthought in his world. Annie talked about the stress their marriage had been under in a 1979 interview. She also revealed that they had briefly separated, which devastated Denver. Unable to handle the distance, he fled to Switzerland, where he attempted to process the pain of their tumultuous relationship. The separation lasted only 6 days. Denver said it felt like forever, but in the end, Annie assured him that she loved him, and they made the decision to try again at marriage. In an attempt to make their relationship stronger, the couple turned to family life, adopting 2 children, Zachary and Anna Kate, and for a while, it seemed like their family had brought them closer together. As the most significant role in his life, Denver loved becoming a father. He even composed a song for his son, "A Baby Just Like You," that had the line. Denver later acknowledged that his own ego had contributed to their problems, his success had altered him, and he hadn't realized that he hadn't always been the best partner. Happy Christmas, little Zachary. He was a loving representation of his love for his kids, but the deeper problems in their marriage remained. Annie, on the other hand, felt that they had simply been too young to handle the massive changes that fame brought into their lives. Their attempts to keep their marriage together eventually failed, and in 1982 they decided to get a divorce. The divorce was far from amicable, as Denver, who had a reputation for being poetic and gentle, shocked many when reports surfaced of his explosive anger during their split. In a moment of frustration, he cut their marriage bed in half with a chainsaw, a dramatic and symbolic act that demonstrated the amount of resentment that had accumulated over the years. Annie also claimed that he had become physically aggressive, almost choking her at one point. After his divorce from Annie, Denver fell in love again with Australian actress Cassandra Delaney. They met in the mid-1980s, and their relationship soon gained public attention. In 1988, they were married in a beautiful ceremony in Aspen. The romantic romance that had once inspired a love song had now turned into bitterness and regret in the heat of an argument. The place Denver still called home to the outside world, it seemed like he had found happiness again. In 1989 they welcomed their daughter Jessie Bell, further cementing their bond, but as history has already shown, Denver's relationships often struggled under the weight of his personal demons. His marriage to Cassandra was no different. Within a few years cracks began to appear, and by 1991 they had separated. Their divorce was finalized in '93. Denver later reflected on the marriage with regret, writing in his autobiography Take Me Home that Delaney, quote, had made a fool of me from one end of the valley to the other. Their marriage had been troubled from the start. Reports surfaced that the relationship had been fraught with conflict, with Delaney later describing Denver as a hard-drinking, vindictive bully. His struggles with alcohol became more pronounced during this period, leading to 2 separate arrests for driving under the influence in the early '90s. These incidents severely impacted his life, and the FAA ultimately revoked his medical certification, preventing him from flying. For a man who had loved aviation nearly as much as music, it was a devastating blow. Despite his personal struggles, he remained devoted to his children. He never let his divorces affect his role as a father, and he continued to send flowers to Annie on her birthday and Mother's Day long after they had separated. What John Denver said about his wife before he died: when the plane he was piloting plunged into the waters off the California coast. He was 53 years old. As the years passed, Denver seemed to grow more reflective about his past, particularly his relationship with Annie. He had loved and lost, but it was clear Annie remained a significant part of his life even decades after their divorce. In one of their final conversations, he shared something deeply personal with her, words that took on an even greater meaning after his tragic passing. According to Annie, their last phone call was emotional. Denver thanked her for the flowers she had sent him for his birthday, and then after a pause he told her, "Oh, but Annie, I love you." Annie responded, "John the first, love you too, have a great trip, and I'll see you when you get back." Those words were their final exchange. Soon after, on October 12, 1997, Denver was 53 years old when he was piloting a light aircraft over Monterey Bay when a fuel calculation resulted in a fatal crash. Annie talked candidly about the relationship after his death, acknowledging that although Annie's song still made her cry, her favorite song of his was perhaps Love, a duet he had recorded with Placido Domingo. Now, let's hear what you think of John Denver's last words to Annie. Please share your thoughts in the space provided below.